Today we held the first presidential debate of the 2020 election year. The first section of the debate was with candidates Celia Anderson, Nicole Clark, and Adrian Jules. The first question asked was about some foreign policy issues and actions. Anderson stated she prioritizes diplomacy first and military second, saying we should try to talk things out. Clark differed, saying she appreciates diplomacy but that we should use strategy and leverage more than anything else, and saying we already have a sufficient military budget, size, and power. Mr. Jules took another different approach, saying we should build up our military and maintain it, that some people won't accept diplomacy. Next, the candidates debated over the criminal justice system and the death penalty. Ms. Anderson believes the policy should be the same across all states and that we should reintroduce the three-strike policy. She also says federal government should regulate the death penalty, but leave the implementation up to the states. Ms. Clark, on the other hand, believes there will be too much inconsistency if we leave the justice policy up to each individual state, saying that there should be equality in the justice system with the same punishments for the same crimes across the board. She also made it clear she is against the death penalty, saying we should not punish but we should reform people conditionally. Mr. Jules finds himself somewhere in the middle, saying the justice policies and death penalties should be a decision left up to the states, but that it should be humane either way. The next topic was monitoring citizens and putting suspected terrorists under surveillance. Ms. Anderson and Ms. Clark agreed that it violates privacy rights to monitor all citizens, but that it should be allowed if people could be potential terrorists. Ms. Anderson says people should go through due process and have evidence against them before being monitored, while Ms. Clark says we should follow up on even the most minor suspicions, but that it's not worth surveillance if there's none from the general public. As for Mr. Jules, he agrees to an extent, saying potential terrorist threats should be monitored, and mentioned reforming the Patriot Acts after saying he supports them. Finally, the candidates talked about how to enact change in America. Anderson says we should take baby steps to equality and use different ways to go about it. Clark says we need some baby steps, but some things require fixing more immediately. And Jules says we sometimes need drastic change, but change should not come too quickly or too close together. In closing statements, Anderson resorted back to equality, Clark repeated her idea of peace, and Jules hit on the idea to unite the nation and building America to something.
For round two, the more conservative candidates agreed on most topics like fixing Social Security, getting rid of fracking, and reforming the criminal justice system. However, General Reagan seemed slightly unprepared in comparison to some of Michelle Scott and voted for May's well-thought-out responses. Let's take a look at his response to a question about criminal justice reform.
You can't answer the question?
I can, but just let me think.
Then answer the question.
I want to think about my words.
No, that's not how this works.
Policemen. There's policemen out there who are friends with judges, and they've been able to get away with doing illegal things. Well, not get away, but face a lesser penalty for doing a illegal thing.
An interesting response, but hopefully he got his point across in order to pull out of last place in the polls. On the other hand, Michelle Scott performed very well with confidence and concise answers. She provided solutions to many of the problems, not just explanations of them, which is a plus. Voted for May also performed very well as he supported his mostly conservative stances.
A wide range of questions were asked yesterday, such as foreign policy questions dealing with Cuba and more domestic issues such as the legalization of recreational use of marijuana. Each candidate was given a question, time to answer, and then the group as a whole was able to debate the question and give their different views on each subject. With having all 6 candidates on the board yesterday, there was much more debating over issues than Tuesday, as there seems to be a 3-2 split between more liberal and conservative candidates, while one candidate seems to argue both sides of the spectrum. John F. Reagan and voter for May had very similar answers when it comes to things such as foreign policy and military use. Celia Anderson, Nicole Clark, and Adrian Jules also had very similar answers, but wanted to do things slightly different, such as the way military was going to be used and what kind of approach would be used in foreign policy. Mrs. Clark opted for a much more democratic approach, while Adrian wanted to use military force when and if it would ever be necessary. Candidate Michelle Scott, however, debated both sides of the spectrum, arguing for more liberal social ideas and more conservative economic and foreign policy ideas.
Our poll results from after this debate look very similar to our last poll, with Michelle Scott down by only 2 votes, John F. Reagan and Adrian Jules staying the same, voted for May and Celia Anderson both up by 1, and Nicole Clark up by 2.
Now that round 2 is finished, the 3 candidates will move on to the final debate before Thursday's vote. Stay tuned for more coverage of the 2020 election.